Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State. This podcast is presented by betonline.ag, your number one source for all your sports info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's NBA playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters. We have you covered for all your sports wagering needs, whether it's the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NHL, right to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info, including live betting options, plus your favorite casino and card games that you can play right from your home. Head to betonline.ag today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. State of State is presented by BetOnline, where the game starts. Also, State of State is a proud supporter of Blue-White Outfitters. Blue-White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. All sales from Blue-White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Justin, it's good to be back with you. For those of you that hear the frog in my throat, it's because I was screaming all this past weekend for Impact Wrestling, our historic Rebellion pay-per-view event this past Sunday in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So for those of you that care about pro wrestling and Penn State football, you're in the right place. So thank you all so much for joining us. Justin, you had the chance to be in State College at Beaver Stadium. You were busy this past weekend with a lot of different things that you have your hands in, especially the NIL collectives, but you did get to take in the Blue-White game. So big thanks again to Aeneas Hawkins for hopping on this past weekend to dissect everything with the game. But what were some of your overall thoughts about this year's Blue-White game?
Overall thoughts on this Blue-White game. Yeah, I mean, happy to be back on, jumping into it. But was the actual size of the team. I remember when I first got to Penn State and we would play, different teams, whether it's Ohio State, Michigan, our top, you think of depth of rosters and warmups, you really get a chance to eyeball test the other team, like, right, their depth, whether it's like all the DBs are 6 foot or above, all the receivers, all the linemen look a certain type of way. And at that point, we had nice talent at the top level, but, sometimes the depth was there. Seeing the guys this year and being up close and personal, seeing like the size profile of the whole entire team. I mean, sometimes people like to say like, oh, it looks like an SEC team, but it's like the team looks large to say the least. Like, and just from a size standpoint, like they look like it's one of the best looking teams from an aesthetic standpoint that I've seen at Penn State in the recent years.
It's something James Franklin has harped on for a while now. It feels like the last few years that Penn State needs to get bigger and putting on, quote, good weight. There's a lot of guys that he's pointed to that have put on that good weight. Abdul Carter is one of them. You and I talked about it a couple of weeks ago that Nicholas Singleton is listed at 228. Vega Ioane is an offensive lineman that James Franklin marvels at, 365 pounds, but looks fantastic. Do you think that's looking within the Big Ten specifically? Because when I think about size in the Big Ten, I certainly think about Michigan. I'd say second. I think about Ohio State, and then Penn State is third in there, obviously. But you're maybe trying to think beyond the Big Ten this year.
Absolutely. I think you're thinking nationally. That's why I say sometimes it's a level of SEC builds. Like when you look at some of those teams built from the top down, whether it's the Alabamas, the LSUs, or the Georgias, like they're just massive across the board. But sometimes when you're just winning matchups based on physics, not always necessarily skill, because like when we talk about football, it's an athletic size, speed type of game. And so when you have that much artillery in your bucket, is you can go to war. I mean, so at the same time, like now looking at Penn State this year, they look like those teams. Obviously, Michigan, Ohio State, they obviously have great looking teams in their profiles, whether it's Michigan's more of a power run and Ohio State has like the spread offense type situation, but prototypical size across the board. I think for Penn State, they look like a playoff team from just aesthetics across the board. You see freshmen like Tony Rojas come in, Tamir Robinson, just like nice looking prospects and making plays right into the game, right? Even Drew Aller, like he's making some nice plays, coming in and scanning the whole field, coming backside, hitting a dig, throwing a laser in there to the receiver and scoring a touchdown. So like you saw some nice promising things along with not just the size, but that's a metric that is hard to attain. Like you just can't. God doesn't make that many big people in those different positions that can move. And so for Penn State to have the depth and size across the board, and we know the athleticism is there. I mean, it's exciting.
It was really exciting to take in the whole game. Obviously, you talk about the size. That's something we're going to touch on in a moment in regards to defensive tackle. I do want to get to that in a minute, but there's so much from this game that you can really dissect. Two players that James Franklin continued to mention. He mentioned him at halftime. He mentioned him in his post-game remarks. Is that Amari Evans, the wide receiver, really had a nice day, had a touchdown, had 80 yards receiving, I believe had 5 catches, was an asset for both Bo Prabula and Drew Aller out there. What did you see from Amari Evans as someone who knows what it's like to play wide receiver?
I mean, yeah, just clean route running, right? You come running backside dig, make a nice play, and get into the end zone. Showing some yak there, and just making the plays and being a reliable receiver for a first year quarterback is always essential, especially when we're trying to find that number one guy. It's still going to be interesting to see how Dante Cephas fits into the rotation of receivers. But I mean, he came out and did what he was supposed to do in the spring game.
Yeah, James Franklin even went as far as to say that he thinks Amari Evans has emerged as that number 3 wide receiver. Now, we're assuming 1 and 2 or 1A, 1B, however you want to look at it, are going to be Keandre Lambert-Smith and Trey Wallace, which is great. Those two didn't do anything, I would say, remarkable in the blue-white game, Justin, but nor did you necessarily need to see them do anything remarkable to make you feel better. Everything that we've heard throughout spring ball has been really, really positive, and James Franklin has even said in the last week and a half of spring ball that Amari Evans had really come on. And then he also named guys like Caden Saunders, Anthony Ivy, Malik McClain obviously got a good run during the blue-white game. When you look at that wide receiver core altogether, do you think Amari Evans has maybe locked up the number 3, or do you think it's still open?
I mean, it's hard to say anything's locked up out of spring ball because you never know what happens in fall camp, right? That's when positions are won and you're going into the season. But and again, that's when we throw in another receiver that's being transferring in with Dante Cephas. But I think we hold that off until the summer. But at the same time, I think he made a nice imprint on the spring.
Yeah, he really jumped out. Another player that really jumped off the screen, the radio for me, because I was in Canada. I was listening to Steve Jones and Jack Ham, which was really pleasant, actually. I loved the experience, was Dennis-Sutton. Now, in the blue-white game, the concept of a TFL and a sack are relative because it's a tag down. You're not obliterating your quarterbacks. But Dennis-Sutton did get 2 sacks, technically, in the blue-white game, and was described by James Franklin multiple times as, quote, unblockable. And you and I were talking about this before we started recording, is that James Franklin is very careful about what he says to the media. Using the term unblockable is a really strong term. What did you think of what Dennis-Sutton did?
I mean, I thought it was very impressive. That was somebody that really stuck out to me, especially him running with the 2s and knowing that we're on the opposite team. So he was going against the 1s and the better players and still making that impact and those plays. I think that just opens up the defense to a whole new bucket of trouble, right? When you talk about blitzes and being able to move him around, and you have like a elite pass rusher being able to just rush 4 guys and do different things on the back end when you have athletic linebackers in the secondary that they're going into the season with. I mean, like I said, you can really dial up some nice defenses and continue to stay on top when it comes to the passing efficiency and total defense across the country.
Yeah, defense as a whole looked very, very good, and James Franklin said the defense was outstanding during the blue-white game. The secondary, especially Kalen King, as advertised, Johnny Dixon, as advertised, Storm Duck, the transfer from UNC, looking very, very good. You and I think very highly of him. KJ Winston, somebody at defensive back, really was flying all over the field during this game. Were you surprised to see that from Winston?
Nope. That's kind of been not at all. That's kind of been the word, coming out of high school out of DeMatha, coming in here, there was high praise on just the type of athlete he was, and just he just had a very small developmental curve to have to improve to get to like a special level player. So I'm excited to see what happens with him this season. I think he's going to be one that makes a splash onto the scene this year.
Franklin has said a lot about getting that 2 deep in a good position, but he even went as far as to say, especially something like defensive tackle, he'd love to see a 6 deep, basically 6 guys that you feel good about, which is pretty astounding to say something like that. And he believes that Penn State has gotten back to the capability of having the depth that they did before the pandemic, before those two really dreadful seasons in 2020 and 2021, where COVID-19 just messed up everything for teams all across the country and Penn State especially. So I'm very interested to see how Winston fits into this secondary, because if anything, Justin, it feels like there's just a lot of guys you can get on the field and rotate in. Knowing what that opportunity is like for a defense, how much pressure does that put on an offense when it's just constantly a revolving door of personnel, but not necessarily a big drop off in ability?
I think it's a critical advantage, man, especially when you're playing, just from the standpoint of playing on defense, when the receivers are always rotating, right? When they've got different personnel, whether it's 21-11, it's a different receiver and they're 6 deep running in and out and they're running fades and doing all these different things. But it's interesting because James always had a philosophy of rotating DBs, which I won't say question, but it was just interesting to me, but to build depth of the roster. Right. So if guys had to come in or they were getting snaps or they're freshmen and different things of that nature, were getting quality reps. So when they were time to step up, that gap was much smaller. So even when I was there and Amani Orway was coming through and scouts would ask like, hey, well, why was he rotating? Because this is happening. Then when they start finding out, it's like, oh, it's for depth. And you start to see how people play with a heightened sense of urgency when it's like, all right, I got to make this play, or you're just playing at that level. But with that being said, to sum up what you're saying, I mean, it's a critical advantage. I mean, you want to be able to get into a rhythm as a defensive back, but to be able to rotate guys and play more man-to-man coverages, knowing that you can get a blow every once in a while, or if you're just rotating and doing multiple look packages, I mean, it makes the game of football fun.
It makes a quarterback think a lot.
Oh, absolutely. You can't really identify anyone, right? When you got keys, whether you're looking at a nickel, it's like, okay, 25 is blitzing, or if this time is Winslow coming, or it's just, it makes it very creative and gives Manny Diaz a nice, again, artillery to play with.
Yeah, a lot of options. And to your point about Amani, he's doing all right in the National Football League.
Yeah, he's doing pretty good.
Just fine. Yeah, he's doing just fine. Nobody can pronounce his last name, but he's doing just fine. There you go. And then speaking of quarterbacks, I do want to touch on Drew Aller and Bo Prabula real quick. The lines on them, the statistics at the end, Drew Aller finished 19 of 30, 202 yards and a touchdown, about a 63% completion percentage. Meanwhile, Bo Prabula, a little rougher day through the air, 10 completions on 27 attempts and under 100 yards, and was given an interception. So again, these things are all relative. It's a blue-white game. This is a glorified scrimmage. There are some rules that are a little bit different. So you don't necessarily look at these in terms of, oh, this is a distinct example of Bo Prabula's maybe struggles in the passing game and Drew Aller being just fabulous in the passing game. There are definitely things to work on. Something that's been talked about the entire spring is that there's, quote, a true competition at quarterback. In my opinion, going back through this game, it's Drew Aller at number one. Now, we're not going to get an announcement of any kind. You and I both know how Franklin operates, probably until the week of the West Virginia game, which is a little over 130 days away, by the way. So right. I can't wait for that. But watching the quarterbacks, how did you feel about them?
I mean, I think there's some promise there, right? I think there's something to hang your hat on, especially when, like I said, I talk about the play where Drew threw the touchdown. I mean, just to get in there, read all the way through your progression, hit the backside dig with the type of velocity he put on the ball. I mean, and he moves better in the pocket than I thought he would, right? Just from pocket presence, stepping up, moving around. He wasn't just a statue. So like there was a lot of promise. So I'm encouraged, to be completely honest.
Are you a fan of rivalries? Are you a fan of smack talk? Do you like to stand out from the crowd at tailgates? If so, check out Smack Apparel and see what their team has geared up for football season. Their Let There Be White tee is the perfect gear for all those famous whiteout games at Beaver Stadium. Or get straight to the point with the worst tee for all the Ohio State haters out there. Smack Apparel has the must-have tees for all your teams, including pro and college football, plus basketball, baseball. Every fan is covered. Head over to smackapparel.com and use the promo code STATE10, that's STATE10 at checkout for 10% off. Again, that's smackapparel.com, promo code STATE10 at checkout. Why wear boring when you can wear Smack? Are you looking for undeniably good hair and beard care? Then Maestro's Classic is perfect for you. Maestro's has beard washes, beard oils, beard butters, plus hair gels and pomades. It's one brand for every man. Visit maestrosclassic.com. That's Maestros classic.com and use our promo code STATE20. That's STATE20 at checkout for 20% off your order. Maestro's Classic, crafting a better you. And for Bo, especially seeing him run a considerable amount was good because you understand maybe what his package is going to be. That's something that's been discussed going into 2023 is that both quarterbacks are going to have the same base offense that they're going to have to know and execute. But then both of them are different guys, different athletes, obviously. Both are going to have different skill sets. And it seemed like we got a little taste of what Bo's package is potentially going to look like. So I'm very interested to see how that progresses. The biggest positive for me coming out of this is that everybody was healthy. No major injuries. We talked about bubble wrapping certain guys, i.e. Nick Singleton and Katron Allen and Drew Aller as well. So that was really positive. So it just felt, there's things to work on. And James Franklin was talking about there needs to be better competition at the defensive tackle spot. He wants to see some of those wide receivers really take a step in terms of solidifying who that 3, 4, 5, and 6 are. Talked about punting needing to be better. There's little things to nitpick on coming out of this, but overall, healthy. That's the best thing you could ask for going into this offseason period now. So looking back on spring ball as a whole, what's your overall takeaway from what Penn State accomplished?
Overall takeaway is I think this is the year to get over that hump that we've been looking for. I think, like, just to kind of sum it up, I mean, there's just a lot of talent. Even just being around the guys at the different events and just walking around them, there's an aura that they have. Like they seem to get along. They seem to be very confident and moving around. And yeah, it's exciting. I think this is the year that we get over the hump and into the playoffs. That's my takeaway.
I think it needs to start with aiming for a Big Ten championship game. Start there.
Sure.
And I'm a big fan of thinking that this team can make the college football playoff, can contend for the national championship. But if you can get yourself into the Big Ten championship game and just set that goal, maybe, you'll never hear the team talk about it publicly. Every once in a while, guys come out and say, oh, we can win the national title this year. But Franklin likes to, tamp that down and just temper expectations.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think that a lot of the vibes in the building is they've been to the Big Ten championship, so I think that's always going to be that's always a goal, right? That's a built-in goal. I think, all right. I think there's makings when you look at this team and where they finished last year, whether there's question marks that you had going into next year or whatever that case may be, where the talent was last year and how they elevated, where their skill level can be. With them being on that brink last year, I think this is the year that everyone stays healthy, hopefully.
Fingers crossed.
Get over that hump, because that's the hump that I think is those thin layers when we get into like the NIL and talent acquisition and getting over that hump when everyone quotes back to him saying there's a difference between us and Ohio State. Like, that's a real hump that you have to get over. So that's what I'm referring to. I definitely agree about the Big Ten championship. We gotta win that first.
Well, yeah, of course. It all begins there. And I'm somebody who, ever since that 2018 post-game press conference against Ohio State, I went to that game. I remember watching Dwayne Haskins lead that comeback, and it was just demoralizing. And the way that James Franklin talked about, we've been a good football program, we can be a great football program, but we're not an elite football program. Is 2023 an elite season for Penn State football? It looks like it could be.
It looks like it could be.
Yeah. Some of the other things that Franklin touched on, an important thing for Penn State fans to be aware of if they don't already know about it, is that we're in another transfer portal window right now. I believe until the end of the month. I think it started April 15th, if I'm not mistaken, until the 30th. I found it interesting, Justin, to hear after the Blue-White game, we had a hunch that you were going to hear James Franklin say, we're looking for depth and players at defensive tackle. That wasn't a surprise. There's some injuries at that position, so that wouldn't hurt to have somebody that you can go get in the portal. A lot of people freaked out in the last few weeks because Georgia's defensive tackle Bear Alexander, who was a big part in the national championship game, entered the portal. We're recording this Tuesday afternoon, so if he's already somewhere else by tomorrow morning when this posts, then we were wrong. But there's some talent out there to be gotten. I found it interesting, Justin, that James Franklin also mentioned in the portal potentially going to get another wide receiver when he's already gotten two. How did you feel about that?
I mean, I think you always can have weapons. I believe in one-touch guys, right? So even when we think about the depth of receivers that they do have, they have some quality receivers, but can anyone blow the top off? So like having that diversity in receivers when you can have those guys, I mean, it's real easy to drop a play to a slant like a KJ Hamler, him take it 70 yards, right? So you always want to put the bait out there to even find one of those type of playmakers on the edge. Well, the first-year quarterback.
Yeah, of course. First-year starter at quarterback, and it's something that Franklin went even as far as to say, quote, "We won't turn down a great player at any position," which is a no-brainer when you hear it, but at the same time, that should perk up a lot of ears in that locker room. If you were in that locker room, you heard that, you're like, "Oh, I got to work. I got to work even harder."
I like that, man. I mean, I think it gives a reality to the situation, right? When you get there, I mean, we all knew that scholarships are year-to-year type basis where you can get out-recruited. And, like, that's the type of level that Penn State's on, and that's what comes with top-level Power 5 programs. Like, if you're not on board or if you miss a recruiting prospect, like, you can out-recruit that guy, and now you kind of have a wasted scholarship. Like, you want to stack and make sure that things are right. So I think it's good that James is coming out and saying, "Hey, we're looking for this." So the receivers are on notice. Like, all right, he's telling us. He's not saying it's your job to lose and bringing someone else. And like, "Hey, who's this guy?" It's like, no, I'm telling you exactly what it is. So I think that's the making of radical transparency and accountability in a team that kind of rises to this level of expectation to accomplishing what they want to accomplish.
Yeah, and let's not forget there's still more players inbound this summer as a part of this 2023 recruiting class. We talked about Dante Cephas. There's more guys on the way.
Right.
So there's always a question mark. I especially felt watching the Blue-White game, Justin, that the running backs not named Singleton and Allen really looked aggressive. They looked like there was a sense of urgency. I wouldn't go as far as to say desperation, but you and I have discussed recently, Trey Potts is on his way from the University of Minnesota, former Golden Gopher running back. There's a possibility of a three-headed monster there, but it really felt like during the Blue-White game, message was received for the guys behind them in terms of Emil Davis, Tank Smith, Tyler Holsworth, getting in there and attacking your reps every single time. So I was very happy to see that.
I mean, I think that's a shout out to Coach Seider. I mean, at the end of the day, when you see that type of similar culture through the way that running backs approach the game, that speaks to the coach's presence in that room, whether it's the first two guys that set the tone, but it's a attitude and mentality, because you always believe that players, personify like their coach's mentality. So like, that's what you want to see from a running back group, a level of physicality and sense of urgency.
Now we get into the doldrums of summer when it comes to the football calendar. So for us, as people who cover the team and obviously care about the future of the team, it gets a little quiet. James Franklin was talking about in his post-game press conference that this upcoming period is going to be used to, quote, determine our identity based on the footage from spring practices, and the graduate assistants are also beginning to work on the first four opponents for 2023. You've lived this window. What else is happening between now and August camp?
Oh man, I mean, camp season, talent acquisition camp season, prospect camp season. That's what we got going on now. I mean, from the coaching staff standpoint, right? Like, not really on the road, but now you got to go around and see the next crop of guys that you're going to offer. Who's the next, Nick Singleton out there? Who's the next Katron Allen? Who's the next Joey Porter? Or Kalen King? So that's the hot button when we get into this timing period, and you got official visits coming up as well. I mean, I think those things start cycling through, and with the NCAA changing the rules with unlimited official visits, make sure when that starts. But those are the things that they'll be attending to. And then the players from that side, this is when you get into session 1, session 2 of summer training, getting ready for the mad dash to the starting lineup and camp.
Yeah, you talked about the unlimited official visits as something James Franklin has spoken publicly about, and that the calendar for a college football coach, college football staff, period, the players as well, it just continues to get filled up more and more every single year. So these recent rule changes are a positive and a negative at the same time. The unlimited amount of visits, you got to try and take advantage of that as much as possible. And James Franklin and his staff are very much about getting people in early in the morning and not trying to ignore the people on their current staff, but also trying to give as much attention to this player and sell them on the university and try and get them to come and be a part of the program. So this is just a really difficult time of year, and we continue to see week to week commitments and possible recruits being landed or at least identified for 2024, 2025, hell, even into 2026. This just doesn't stop, and you've lived that.
No, it really doesn't. I mean, the way guys, I mean, I don't think the general public knows how much work coaches put in, right? I'm talking 80 to 100 hours a week of just running around. Like it never stops. So with unlimited official visits, although it's great for athletes, I mean, I don't even know if it's great for the athletes, to be completely honest with you, because you should be getting into operational mode as much as possible and not having more distractions because you can only go to one school. But, with all the new NIL opportunities, I guess they want to open it up, but a lot of the people that make the rules don't work in recruiting or in the football operations and recognize like that help, like that work-life balance is it's getting a little lopsided with the unlimited visits. So I'm actually against it from somebody that works in it and has a lot of friends, family that work within the business. That's a tough call. And we know prospects might take advantage of it, especially like a place like Penn State where they want to come up and just visit. It's a great game, especially in season. And to the point that you're saying, to identify and target athletes that you want to come to your school, sometimes making a athlete make a decision of their 5 places, you can see like if you're serious or not. Now you don't really know. And now it's just like, I have to court everybody. And
Right.
then you just, I don't know how sustainable that is.
I do not envy them. And then to your point about trying to maintain a family life, I don't know how the hell you do that.
Oh, that's not the one. I mean, it's a lifestyle once you get into it, so it's not really work-life balance. So that's
Yeah.
we can just like clarify that there's no attaining work-life balance. It's a lifestyle where you can at least stay healthy, just so you're like,
just stay alive. Yeah,
yeah, just staying alive is what I'm talking about.
And you talked about how this is a challenging time for players as well as that. James Franklin spoke especially about in his post-game press conference, and he said it in spring practice as well, was that quote, "We can't throw enough." And what he meant by that in terms of the quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, running backs, hell, even offensive linemen, just for work in that respect. The renovations recently to Haluba Hall are going to allow for that because it'll be just more space. It's open air. So basically, the way that James Franklin is looking at it, the reason why he pushed for these renovations to be done to Haluba Hall and what is going on with the Lash building as well, so that these players can get in the work that they need. So I come back to some of the statistics I just mentioned in regards to the Blue-White game. Brabula getting 27 attempts, Aller getting 30 attempts. It's almost like you kind of know what you have in the run game going into this. I mean, you know what you have in the run game. Let's be very honest. Singleton and Allen at running back, but also the skill of this offensive line. Now, this period between April and August camp, it's Aller, Brabula, and Jackson Smolik getting out there and throwing as many passes and getting as comfortable as they can with the passing game. You're aware of a lot of the improvements that have been made to the football facilities. What's at their disposal?
I mean, what's at their disposal?
Yes.
From in terms of the facility?
Yeah, like the improvements that have been made.
I mean, you talk about space, right? Like at the end of the day, they had world-class facilities, and I mean, from the standpoint of having an indoor like track in the weight room, I mean, just tossing the ball around so receivers can get on the jugs anytime of the week, like easily get on the jugs, right, and after a lift and different things of that nature. But Haluba's always been kind of state of the art, so just way it's opening up from what they're doing to the renovations. I mean, I just think it's a level of still working on that chemistry. So I don't know if it's too much to do with the renovations, but just more so comfortable to be in, right? When you have space and there's not a lot of things on the side where they've been using throughout the renovations.
Yeah, time to explore the space.
Right.
Well, spring practices are over, so we are going to be looking for any and all news as the weeks go by. So thank you all so much for joining us. Get involved in the comments section. We want to hear from you guys, how you guys felt about the Blue-White game, what you're looking forward to, and what you'd like to hear from us during the off season. We're always trying to get you guys whatever you're looking for in regards to content here on State of State. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And of course, let us know what you think of the show on Twitter at TheKing1 and at Tom Hannafin. State of State is presented by Bet Online.